Hello, hello. Here we are again, coming to you from the Paranormal World Show under the umbrella of Broadcast Team Alpha. And we are coming to you from 44 different platforms around the world. And my name is Agi, and I'm the host tonight, or this morning, or this afternoon, depends on where you are around the world. And we are also transmitting through the Conscious Awakening Network. You got to go visit those guys because they got close to 50 different shows over there, and they are covering just about everything that both you and me need to know about. So that's go and check them out at consciousawakeningnetwork.org. And of course, they are on YouTube and a bunch of other places with the same name. And as you probably can see here, I have a guest with me that I don't think he needs any introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway for the two of you out there that haven't heard of him. So we are off. Before I do that, actually, I want to tell you how you can connect with me and Nori. You can go to broadcastteamalpha.com. That's our website, and send us a message from there. We will get the email and we'll get back to you and we can see what we can do for you. And then if you are watching on YouTube right now, that's the place to be because it's the only place we are able to monitor the chat room. And a lot of the other places, they don't have a chat room or I'm not able to be there. So that just explains why. And we have Brad Olsen with us. And he is coming, just came back from Burning Man up in Nevada, I think it is. And there's some really fun stories from up there. But we are going to talk about more serious stuff too. And that is what happened to all the good stuff, the good technologies that the old Nazi German Empire, I think we should almost call it. What happened to it? Because a lot of it disappeared. It went somewhere. So did several thousand German officers. They disappeared. Could not find them after the war. They went somewhere, and we're going to hear a little bit about where they went. Maybe South America for some of them, and also Antarctica. So this is going to get interesting. So stay with us to the end of this one. So welcome to the show, Brad.
Hey, Augie, it's always great to be on here, Team Alpha broadcast, and talk to you about all the interesting stuff going on in the world and the history that we haven't been allowed to know about, but starting to piece it all together. And it's coming out with a pretty comprehensive picture about what really happened after World War II.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking for it because I've studied the German disappearance a long time. I found out the flying discs and all that. But before that, let's have some fun. You came back from Burning Man, and I love to hear some stories from up there.
Yeah, I just got back 48 hours ago, still rocking the beard. Uh, it was a great year. The last 2 years at Burning Man were extreme weather years. So 2 years ago, it was 105 degrees for most of the time. It was really too hot.
Yeah.
And last year was the Mud Man, the mud apocalypse, where it rained really, really hard just before the man. So the man burns every year on Saturday, but it rained so hard they had to postpone it all the way till Monday. And then they also do this thing called the temple burns on Sunday. Typically, it did this week, but because of that rainstorm last year, it didn't burn all the way until Wednesday. So everything got delayed. And so people were really concerned about the weather. Plus, I think a lot of people are having financial difficulties. So for the first time in decades, Burning Man did not sell out. Could have still bought a ticket day of.
Really?
Usually they sell out months in advance. And so everybody who wasn't going to go, Aunt Edna got sick, and so I can't go, and neither can my boyfriend, kind of thing. They had to put their tickets for sale at a great discount. So
Mm.
a friend of mine was driving. We found some tickets and just decided, yeah, let's go. And it was a really fun trip. So this was my 18th burn in 29 years. I've been
Wow.
going since 1995 when it was so tiny. And so I've seen the whole city grow. And so last weekend, Augie, the weekend they burned the man, they call it Black Rock City because there's 70,000 people there. That makes it the third largest city in the state of Nevada after Vegas,
Wow.
Henderson, and Reno. So
Oh man.
just you can't imagine a temporary city just going up in a couple weeks, and then by now it's mostly cleared out.
Wow. Man, oh man. Yeah, but you were there from the beginning to the end then, so you probably saw some interesting stuff happening. Maybe some fun stories that you could tell us.
Yeah, they open the gates midnight on Saturday, so really Sunday morning, very early. But this year there was another rainstorm. So I have a ranch just 2 hours away from where they do Burning Man, and I saw the storm come in, and we were already planning to go a little later, just the full 9 days. Even though there were these showers and places you could bathe, uh, it's you get kind of dirty, you get kind of grimy out there for 9 days. So we decided to just go under a week, and that was fine because we got to
Yeah.
see the man burn, got to see the temple burn, and now the temple is a very solemn burn. Nobody's screaming and shouting like they are at the man, and it's a party all night Saturday night after the man burns. But the temple, it's a very solemn affair. And for me, I had my mother passed away a couple months ago, so I wrote a memorial to her. And then there was a childhood friend we grew up with also passed away. So to write these memorials, it's somewhat cathartic to release them in the fire with all the other memorials and everybody else, and nobody shouting. There were people crying. It's an emotional affair when the temple burns. And
Yeah.
right when it started on fire, a big dust storm came in, and it was a bit of a whiteout. So it kind of got lost trying to go back to our camp. And then we heard the next day when we were going to bug out, a much bigger dust storm came in, and it did. But we got out in the morning, so really no problem there.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's 70,000 people. That's a bunch.
And two people died, drug
Really?
overdoses.
Really?
Yeah, two people in their 30s, a woman and a man, separate incidents. Uh,
Hmm.
and then last year, somebody was electrocuted to death trying to pull apart a generator plug in the pouring rain. Big no-no.
Oh, that's not a good thing to do.
No.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I know sooner or later I like to get up there to see this because I've never
Oh, I think you
been.
should. You'd
Yeah,
really like it. You're a free
yeah,
spirit.
I bet I will. Yeah, oh, yeah, very much so. But I want to talk a little bit about Antarctica and the Germans also. But before that, I want to first let people know out there that, Brad is also an author and a publisher and a lecturer. He's on just about everywhere out there where you have these things happening. And the last book that he wrote is called Beyond Esoteric. And I have, think, three of his books on the shelf here and somewhere in the house. And folks, he has covered so much in those books that I don't think I've seen any other book cover so much of the esoteric and the stuff that is covered up for us. So I think you need to go to Amazon, or you go to bradolsen.com or cccpublishing.com and have a good look, because I tell you, you are gonna like this. I don't endorse a lot of books, but I really do on this one because it is. I got into it, and Well, I lost the whole night. The first book I got from you when I met you up in there, I got that one
Really?
home and I started reading it and I lost the whole night. I got into it and I couldn't stop. So it was like 6, 7 in the morning when I ended up.
Wow. Well, that's quite an endorsement. Thanks, Augie.
Yeah, yeah. And let's talk a little bit about the Germans and
Hmm.
what happened to them.
Hmm. And history, especially the kind of history that got edited out. Remember, there's an old saying that history is written by the winners, or Voltaire said,
Yeah,
history is the Mississippi of lies. I mean,
yeah,
just so much of history has been withheld or altered or changed that this part of history, as it pertains to German high technology and what they were up to, is very much an esoteric subject. It's really known by only a few select historians that get deep into the weeds here, so to speak, because you wouldn't find it in any of our textbooks in Europe. You can't even have a book with a swastika on it for sale in the EU. It is illegal.
yeah,
And my colleague Michael Sala, who's also written about Antarctica Nazis, he had a book and it showed a Nazi officer shaking hands with a alien, and he had the red and black armband. The book got pulled. It was not allowed to sell. So there is a concerted effort to keep this kind of information away from people. And you kind of got to ask why. Well, the reason is that the Germans didn't really lose World War II. The German army surrendered, the Luftwaffe, so did the Air Forces, the Luftwaffe, the Weimar fighting forces of the army and the navy all surrendered, but the Third Reich did not surrender, nor did the SS. They escaped to South America, to Antarctica, and to other places around the world. They were assisted by the Vatican, who helped them get new identities, new money, and they basically took all their technology with them. And why wouldn't they? They had the most advanced U-boat, that is submarine fleet in the world. And some of the U-boats, some of the submarines, they called it the Fuhrer's convoy at the end. They were as large as a container. They could put container-sized items inside these submarines. So to partly disassemble some of their flying discs and transport
yeah,
them down to South America or Antarctica is completely plausible. They had
yeah,
the technology to do it, and why wouldn't they?
yeah. And they built one of the last submarines they built. I think they called it the milk cow because it was about twice as big wide as all the others. Remember that one? And
Yeah, that's right. And that was part of the Fuhrer's convoy. And so at the very end of World War II, one of the last battles that took place just before Germany surrendered was in the North Sea, and it was a sea battle of the German U-boats, the Third Reich, just decimating all the ships in the sea lanes coming over from North America. We don't hear about that in the history books. They sunk dozens of Allied ships, virtually no loss in submarines, and then they went due south. And it was in Mar del Plata, just outside of Buenos Aires in Argentina, only a few weeks after the surrender, VE Day, that submarines were coming ashore,
mhm,
including reports of Hitler himself with Eva Braun and even their dog Blondie.
yeah,
And they were heading up to La Falda, which is a hill community above Cordoba, Argentina, in a place called the Eden Hotel. And I went to visit it. I took a tour of it. And during the tour, the tour guide, he could actually speak English pretty well, unlike my Spanish, which is not so good. And I asked him, Augie, I said, so do you really think Hitler survived the war and came up here? And he says, oh, I don't have to think it. I know it. I said, well, how do you know it? He said, well, right here in town, La Falda, there is an elderly woman who in the 1940s was a teenager, and she was a chambermaid in the Eden Hotel. And she has been on a couple History Channel shows. taken lie detectors, and she remembers them coming, of
Yeah.
course, with a big security detail, and they would move him around. So when I was in South America on my way down to Antarctica 6 years ago, I was trying to go to a lot of these places, and the other big location, a big German enclave. I'm telling you, I'm part German myself through my ancestry, and I love Wiener Schnitzel and
Oh
Spätzle
yeah,
and German
yeah,
Steine beer, right? Yeah, you could just go into a restaurant down there like you're in Germany, and even the
yeah,
architecture looks the same.
yeah.
And there's a funny joke that in Argentina and Chile, they only have 1% of the population are the indigenous people anymore. So they're kind of going through this existential crisis. Who are we? And most of them are Southern European immigrants, multi generations past. So the joke is, well, we're Italians who speak Spanish, and we wish we were as rich as the Germans, because the Germans still to this day have all the money down there.
Yeah.
And that was very evident in the town of San Carlos de Bariloche down in Patagonia, which, and I've been to Germany many times, is just like a little town out of Bavaria with the mighty Andes Mountains as backdrop and
Mhm.
beautiful deep water, freshwater lakes all around. And in on the banks of Lupa Halpi at Bariloche is the Inalco House, and that was another safe house where Hitler went. And there's a series called Hunting Hitler, was on for 3 series on the History Channel, and they did a couple episodes on the Inalco House. First, they tried to get in on land, as did I. You can't get near it. But then they came in on the lake on a boat, and then they jumped off and scuba dived and came up and explored around the house before security came out and chased them away. But what they found was they got up to the house, and all around the grounds were these stovepipes. So there was a whole underground base there in case they were, say, getting bombed. They could evacuate to the fallout shelter. But more importantly, there was a seaplane garage right on the lake, just like you would dock your boat in a boathouse. They had a seaplane house. So if the authorities were ever getting too close, they could get Hitler and the top SS people and get them in the plane and just fly right over the crest of the Andes and be in Chile. And
Yeah.
what happened during the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s? You had all these fascist governments that were supported and propped up by our CIA. So he had Perón in Argentina. He was a
Yeah.
fascist. He let him come in. And then you had Pinochet overthrow a democratically elected government, and he was in power for decades.
Yeah.
So they had friends in other countries in South America that they could go to if they ever had to make a run for it.
Yeah. Because they had a lot of resources, a lot of money, a lot
A
of
lot of
gold.
resources.
So they paid everybody off. And you mentioned earlier that, yeah, the winner of the war writes history. And I'm sure you're aware of this. And I have a picture on our website of Adolf's chief of staff. He became the chief of staff of NATO in the early 1960s. So they just rotate people that they prefer to have in those positions. What they did before doesn't matter. It is all an inside club. And like George Carlin says, and we're not part of it.
Right. Exactly. And in the case of the Nazis becoming the Fourth Reich, why would they want anybody to know? They would prefer to
Yeah,
stay under the radar, because then they could operate in secrecy, because they no longer had a standing army, but they became an intelligence force.
yeah,
And by doing so, then they were fanning the flames of discontent during the Cold War. There are some great books that I read, one called The Black Sun by Henry, what's his last name? That'll come to me. And he basically wrote about all the details they got about Antarctica coming back, living in New Schwabenland near
yeah.
the Schumacher Ponds, which never froze over.
Mm-hmm.
And so they lived there for many years. And he even said that they would come up in the summer and plant their own food, that they could suntan and be around these lakes that were geothermically heated. And that's where base 211 is, point
Yeah.
211. There's a counterpoint. A lot of people don't know this, more esoteric history. The Germans also set up bases in the far north in the Arctic region. So there's one called Point 105 in the Canadian Arctic, and another called the Thule base in northern Greenland, which is still a military base run by the US. We took it over. So they were building their hiding places all around the world. In fact, uh, Admiral Dolence, who was the highest military leader and he surrendered. He signed the surrender papers to the Allies. But he said that in 1943 that we have built an impregnable fortress for the Fuhrer and I paraphrase, but he made it to sound in a land of never-ending ice. So you could take that to be the Arctic or Antarctica.
Yeah, and in another part of the world, yeah. So they prepared very well. In fact, they started researching on how to move and things out and find another place right after they started and attacked France. That was 1940, I think. 41, they started going to Antarctica and looking around.
Yeah, yeah, very well documented trip in the late 1930s. They took a ship down there called the Schwabenland, which is a
Yeah.
area of Germany that the ship was named after. And then they called this New Schwabenland. They flew around and they charted out and they named all the mountains there. And they claimed a big chunk of what is Queen Maud Land, which was a previous Norwegian claim. It still is. But they chose it, I think, for several reasons. One, because of the geothermal vents that pass through a big fault line, which connects to the mid-Atlantic ridge. So under the middle of the Atlantic, all the way up between Africa and South America, and then between Europe and North America is the mid-Atlantic ridge. It's a volcanic fault line, and it goes all the way up to Iceland, which is known as the land of fire and ice. And Antarctica is the same. It's also the land of fire and ice. There are 93 known volcanoes, active volcanoes in Antarctica. Some of them are under the ice. So you can see how the propensity for having these large under ice domes could form.
Yeah. That's changing a little bit now, possibly when there's a lot of melting going on down there. I wonder
Oh
how.
yeah, a lot of melting. In fact, I do a presentation at the conferences I speak at, and I show a map that just came out right before I went down there, showing areas of Antarctica that are heating up very rapidly. And I saw evidence of that myself in the northern tip of Palmer Peninsula where I went. But other parts of Antarctica are actually cooling down and they're gaining ice on the continent.
Mm-hmm.
So Mother Nature, in her infinite wisdom, is able to balance out the heating with the cooling, and that's why I suspect we haven't had catastrophic flooding at all our coastal communities.
Yeah. Yeah, we always hear the people that think they know something that say, oh, we're going to have 20 foot of increased sea level. Well, yeah, sure. They had that back in the 80s also, and that didn't happen. Not happening now either. For the ones that is monitoring the sea level here off the coast of the United States, there is something minuscule. They cannot even discern the rise.
No.
If there is anything, it can hardly be measured.
Hardly be measured. Less than a millimeter.
Yeah.
And I know that because I was also living in Santa Cruz, California, where they have the very famous beach boardwalk, which has been there 100 years. It's still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, what is happening is the storms are getting more extreme,
Yeah.
and there's nothing you can really do about that. And then when extreme storms come, the wave surge is higher, and then that's doing some more damage. But I think we can also understand that the climate has been manipulated through geoengineering, and you really can't have a serious discussion about climate change unless you also factor in geoengineering. We're doing things to change the natural environment,
Yeah.
and a lot of people don't know about it. Again, history is edited out, and some subjects are just never talked about in the mainstream media or academic, but that doesn't mean they don't exist.
Yeah. And then we have pictures of the portable HARP equipment on boats.
Yep.
I mean, these are 10 stories high domes that they can direct up to just heat the ionosphere, and they can create bubbles that will pull in air, kind of like what we saw last summer off the California coast. There was a high pressure ridge out there sitting there. It didn't move for a long time. And now they've been doing weather modification from back in the 1960s, 70s in Vietnam, where they started.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Cloud seeding to get the rain to come down. And yeah, but
Yeah,
I
in
guess,
Vietnam, it was called Operation Popeye,
yeah,
and they were trying to flood out the Viet Cong from bringing down supplies into South Vietnam. And so when people say, "Oh, we are those aren't chemtrails," like it's been around for decades,
yeah,
almost a century now. Yeah, of course they are seeding the clouds. Of course they're creating weather atmosphere, and of course they can steer hurricanes. I remember seeing a PSA, which they would play in movie theaters in the 50s and 60s. They're kind of newsreels is another name for it. This particular one was produced by Disney. And at the Disney parks, they have Tomorrowland where they talk about new technology coming out. And so this was a PSA for Tomorrowland. This was produced in the 50s or 60s, decades ago. And it was talking about how that climate engineers are now able to control hurricanes so that we never have to be hit by a hurricane ever again. And so, why are they happening? Why are they even becoming more intense? Well, there's a plan behind it. There's
yeah,
always an agenda. And in this case, it's an agenda to destabilize the US. You
yep,
know, we want to get into this. The showdown is in America right now. And to destabilize the US by bringing in all these immigrants, by collapsing the economy, will be the last card to play, perhaps with this fake alien invasion, Project
yeah,
Blue, because America is the last bastion to resist this New World Order agenda.
yeah.
We still have a Second Amendment right, and we're the only country that could really stand up to these globalists. So there is a plan to destabilize this country in many different ways, including weather warfare.
Yeah. And for us, that is a little bit more conspiratorial than the average bear. We can see it everywhere.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And for those of you that joined us late, we are talking with Brad Olsen here. We're talking about anything from weather modification and what happened to the Germans after the Second World War. Then when they disappeared, where did they go? And he's got a book out, Beyond Esoteric, which you really need to go have a look at. It's an awful lot of good stuff in there. That's a series. I guess I got two or three of them here, and go have a look at it. I think you're going to find something very interesting in there. And yeah, we know that there I have seen actually a CIA document where they admit that they know where Adolf went to, where he is in
Mhm.
South America. Have you seen that one?
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
And one of those places was La Falda to the Eden Hotel.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, the winner of the war writes history, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now, um, they have known that they were in Antarctica at base 211 for a long time. And
Yeah.
they tried to go down there with the Operation High Jump,
Right.
which failed because
Miserably.
miserable. Yeah, he was limping home after he lost the ship and lost a whole bunch of sailors. But maybe you could talk more about this because I think
Sure,
you
sure. Well,
covered it more than me.
just a little background. Admiral Byrd was one of the most decorated soldiers, admirals, aviators in US history. And he was tasked to lead a multinational military force down to Antarctica at the end of 1946. So just a little over a year after the end of World War II in Europe, here's Admiral Byrd leading dozens of ships from other countries, including the US. First, they went to Little America, and he had a flight to the South Pole and back. They were tasked to bring back a flying disc, one of the Honeyboo, or as he said in his diary, he described them, the name he used was Flugelrod. And that was the whole purpose of Operation High Jump. They knew that they had gotten out with all the high technology because at the very end of World War II, the Russians were the first to get to the Skoda Works, Skoda, which is in present day Czech Republic.
Yeah.
But it had been their backward engineering. It was the Area 51 of Nazi Germany, where they were doing a lot of test flights. Some of those videos have emerged, as well as the blueprints and documents. But by the time the Allies got there after the Russians, there were no UFOs to be found. And more
The
so,
Rush.
there were no scientists that had worked on these craft at the Skoda Works to be found. They did find a couple scientists with a bullet in their head, probably because they refused to go along with the plan, either evacuating to Antarctica or whether they were going to spill the beans too much. And so some of them were found dead, but the ones that did go along with it, they were shipped out. And that was that big Führer's convoy. And the author that wrote Dark Sun, The Black Sun, was called Henry Stevens. And in his book, he describes how they basically blasted their way through the North Atlantic, which was really the last battle of World War II. And then the first battle of the Fourth Reich was the Battle of High Jump. So, being a military man, Admiral Byrd took his orders and he was to meet the other ships, and they were offshore of New Schwabenland in early 1947. And the Americans had already been doing overflights of the area, surveying new mountain ranges. And then when they got to New Schwabenland, they saw a couple outbuildings of Point 211. And so day one, they did a little pitter patter, dropping of bombs, didn't do much destruction. But then day two, they sent out everything they had to really carpet bomb the area because they knew that they were also underground or under ice. So they wanted to try to collapse the bases. Well, as those planes were flying in to do their bombing mission, they just went right off the radar screen. And none of those pilots, none of those planes have ever been recovered. They were all just with some kind of very advanced weapon, some kind of force field screen, perhaps, or just using an exotic energy weapon to shoot them down. They're gone. So while the Allies, the same day, were just trying to figure out what had happened, up out of the water comes some flugel some UFOs that they very desperately wanted to capture. So then it was just bam, 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 trying to shoot them down. Again, some kind of force field would not allow any of them to be shot down. Again, a very one-sided battle that we don't hear anything about, because they could have taken out the whole fleet of ships, but instead they just sank one ship with what could be described as a direct energy weapon. A laser beam just sliced the USS Murdoch in half with great loss of life. Once you go overboard, if you survive the laser, you're dead of hypothermia within minutes. So even though they were trying to get lifeboats out to save these guys, they couldn't. And so that was enough to know that we can't shoot these things down. They could take out our whole fleet. And so Admiral Byrd, like you said, tail between his legs, did a hasty retreat out of there 2 months into the 6-month expedition. And he gave an interview on, he was on the aircraft carrier, the USS Olympus, and he allowed a journalist from the El Mercurio newspaper to come aboard and was quoted as saying that we will be confronted with an enemy that has the ability to fly pole to pole at incredible speeds. He said this in early 1947. So to have that technology, going on 75 years ago is just amazing. To my knowledge, we don't even have a plane today that can fly pole to pole at incredible speeds. So we knew that we were up against an adversary that had very high technology. They couldn't capture a flugel, and there was a lot of tension between Antarctica and the Fourth Reich. They knew they existed. As you said, there were FBI letters stating they knew that Hitler had escaped. And in the TV series Hunting Hitler, they go into great detail of other evidence that he lived out his natural life in South America. He probably did make a trip down to Antarctica, but like most of the soldiers that got stationed there, they didn't like to be there. It was very desolate. They missed being outdoors and doing things rather than just being at a base and taking orders. So by the time that the US got back down there and sent a nuclear bomb to New Schwabenland, that was in 1958 during Operation Argus. And I do describe everything I'm talking about here in my book, Beyond Esoteric, this lost history.
Yeah, that's why you need to go get that book, folks, because there's a lot more.
And so, but before then, you had the flyover of Washington, D.C., and I have pictures of this in Beyond Esoteric too, of UFOs flying over the Capitol building in July 1952. So this was a response to high jump. And it was basically to say, here's these craft that can fly pole to pole at incredible speeds using some kind of exotic energy that they don't need refueling, and could fly over our airspace, the most protected airspace in the world, uninhibited, right over the Pentagon. And that sent shockwaves through our military. And in Laura Eisenhower's new book, Awakening the Truth Frequency, which is also available at cccpublishing.com, she has a whistleblower with testimony that it was still Truman who was president in the summer of 52 during that flyover. And he panicked because it was the Antarctica Nazis. They knew this. It wasn't UFOs or ETs.
Yeah.
It was basically the honeyboo craft. And so Truman panicked. And Laura writes about this, and also her family testimony. They knew that her great-grandfather, Dwight D. Eisenhower, was just handed a raw deal because Truman surrendered to the Antarctica Nazis. He basically capitulated. And then because he only had a few more years or a few more months in office, just turned it all over to Eisenhower, and he was pissed. He was livid. In fact, he was even told, you can't go to Area 51. in
Yeah.
our country. And he said, well, I'm going to assemble the first army in Colorado and we're going to march in there. And then they worked out a deal somehow. But Eisenhower really has been given a lot of flack for signing treaties with aliens. No, he didn't do that. And getting this raw deal from Truman that they had to capitulate to the Germans. And here he is, the high supreme commander of the Allied forces, and then president in January 1953, less than a decade before the end of World War II, and he's still fighting the Germans.
Yeah.
So then eventually they did go down there and bomb them. But by the time they bombed them in Operation Argus, which was 1958, almost all the Germans had left. They had a problem because every time a supply submarine would come, if just one sailor had the sniffles, had a cold, everybody in the base would get sick. And this was Henry Stevens describes this in his book, that they just got tired of being down there. So by the time we bombed them in 58, there was really no one there or very few and inconsequential. They had already moved their operations back up to South America. And when I was in South America, Augie, I was able to discover one of the underground bases in this mountain near La Falda that has all these UFO sightings. We're even reading in our Lonely Planet book that you go to this town in the shadow of Monte, and there are all these UFO sightings. So when I got back, I'm talking to my friend David Hatcher Childress. He's on Ancient Aliens, famous guy. And I said, yeah, David, we're camping out to do a UFO watch because the Lonely Planet said there was all kind of alien abductions and burns in the grass that people would come out and see. And even in the town, you'd see pictures of green aliens and UFOs and stuff. I mean, it was a big deal. They make a living out of it there,
Uh,
catering to all the tourists. And David Childress says, oh, Brad, don't you know that wasn't aliens? That was a Nazi base. They have an underground base there, and that's where they're backward engineering their technology. He says, don't you know that a real UFO would never leave a burn mark on the grass? A
yeah.
real UFO would never terrorize the citizens and in broad daylight uh, abduct someone. They said real aliens don't do that, but the Nazi bases do, and that
Yeah.
made perfect sense to me. That what everybody's been seeing there was just this is where they relocated.
Yeah. Boy, it gets deep.
It does. It
Uh,
really does.
I also have read that they had contact. I mean, the Germans had contact with the race in the cavern inside the Earth.
Yeah,
What are
yeah.
your
So
thoughts
that's
on that?
well, and it makes perfect sense that they would have contact with ET races. Well, in the case of Nazi Germany, going all the way back to pre-World War II, there was a very famous UFO retrieval that basically the Germans collected in the Black Forest region of Germany, and then another one in Italy, in the Lombardy region. And Mussolini knew that the German scientists were much better than the Italians, and he allowed the Germans to dissect it and basically have a look at it and use it for their own backward engineering techniques.
Yeah.
So it should be said that the Germans had a big head start, not only by the way that they were able to collect new information from the crashed UFOs, but they also had the Vril women. Right after World War One, they were in a Bavarian hunting lodge near Berchtesgaden, and my friend Frank Jacob, he lives down there, and he actually went there and found it. Him and his girlfriend, Tanya Madenford, they found the old hunting lodge. It's still there. And so the Vril women were psychic, and they would grow their hair very long. Maria Orsic was one,
Yep.
and another named Sigril. And they were telepathic to the point where they were communicating with benevolent ETs from Aldebaran. And they were basically communicating telepathically blueprints for UFOs. So this is how the Germans were so advanced over anybody by far in the 1920s and 1930s. So by the end of World War II, the Allies were absolutely terrified that the Germans were going to unleash their wonder weapons, they called them. And had the war gone on another 6 months, they maybe could have used them and turned the tides of the war.
Yeah. And they almost did the last 2 months of the war, because there is in Eisenhower's paper that said one statement that he made: we can still lose this war. That was right after they had 800 bombers fly. The Allied forces had 800 bombers fly in over Germany, and they lost a third of them in one night because of the Hornibus came up behind them and used the a directional EMP pulse weapon, and burned out the electronics in the airplane, and one by one they just end up crashing.
Yeah. It's just amazing how close it was to all of Europe speaking German right now. Maybe 6 more months, and you'd have a German accent, Augie.
No, I've been to Germany, and I can spot a German accent anywhere. This one is Norwegian.
Yeah, I know. You're Scandinavian, but they were.
Yeah. But I spent some time with Colonel Wendell Stevens here in Tucson.
Oh, wow. He's a legend.
Oh, yes. I was over at his house, and he showed me some papers, some of them written in German, and I helped him translate some of that. But he showed me a map of the inside of the earth. It was written in German, so I translated it. I haven't been there for a long time, so my German is a little rusty, or actually a lot rusty. But I got through it to the point where we could understand what it said, and it explained that yes, they were invited in there, but they were also told, if you start doing anything like you did on the surface, we will do away with you.
Yep.
And from what I understand, that they still have a base on the inside of the cavern of the earth, where they come through the entrance at the South Polar region, because we know there's a big hole there.
Big hole there. Yeah, and there's 2 holes. Just like a torus has energy coming in on top and flowing through and around, there's also a giant hole on northern Baffin Island that my colleague Brooks Agnew has discovered and has the GPS coordinates. And he and I were in talks about going there on a Russian icebreaker before the whole Ukraine thing started. Now it might not be possible, but it would make perfect sense that there would be one towards the North Pole and then another one at the South Pole.
Yeah, there is. I know it sounds ridiculous to most people to think, like, why would there be a hole into the interior in the North Pole region? Because all the water would run down there. No, it wouldn't. Because if they're so gradually slow, then, and inside the crust, it creates the gravity. So the water will follow the surface all the way in. And I can see how that would work. And on the inside, there's a base of the Vikings have a base there, because they left Greenland and went to the north. They left message behind in 1420 or so when they left.
Yeah. Yep.
And this is hard to wrap our heads around because when you look at the map on the North Pole, it's all white everywhere. Of course, the computer slides the ice sheet over so you can't see it. But there is this one NASA print taken by the ESA-7 satellite from 32,000 feet in the air, 32,000 miles in the air, straight down to the North Pole that shows an 800-mile wide hole. And I know you've seen that one.
Mm. Yeah, well, it's good to relive if you can pull it up and insert it into this part of the interview.
Yeah, yeah, that would be an interesting thing to do because it is all there.
Yeah.
And that goes along with Fridtjof Nansen's books when he came back from finding the North Pole. He went straight north and could not find anything further north than 83 degrees. It's in his books. I got both books. And he said that he found dead bees on the ice. Bees
Wow.
over 1,000 miles away from where they could be a bee at all. That came from the inside going out.
Yeah, and Admiral Byrd said the same thing, that when
There
he
you
flew
go.
into the hole, he writes about it in his diary that he saw megafauna and megaflora. And the megafauna was a woolly mammoth down on the continental ice shelf, below the ice, I should say, in eastern Antarctica when he flew into the hole near the South Pole. So
Yeah,
all
it
these
is.
things are all these esoteric mysteries and history that we have been told about, but I find them so intriguing. It's all I'm really interested in learning about and studying these days because there's just so much to it. And such a good way to share it with your audience here today too.
Yeah, that's why I've been saying that pretty much everything you know is either a lie or attached to one.
Yep, it sure is.
That's a hard one to accept because we have been taught so well in the institutions of higher learning, and they are so good at it.
Yep.
Should
Well,
we go as far as call it brainwash, or what do you think?
well, we used to be called crazy conspiracy theorists, Augie, but I think now we're more conspiracy realists, just
Yeah.
putting it together.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, we all have some crazy conspiracy theory friends trying to harder to save your life than any medical professional or government entity ever has. So you really
Yeah.
should pay attention to what a lot of people are saying is going on in the world, because we're being directed in the wrong way by these other entities. I think it should be pretty apparent that what has happened over the last 5 years under the disguise of a pandemic
Yeah.
was
That's
not good for any of us.
no, no. I saw a post on Facebook not long ago. I said that the conspiracy theorists, they are the smartest people around because they question everything.
And didn't get the shot.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nothing good about that I've been able
I
to see.
can't think of it, and I suppose there is another one scheduled for us, but we'll just leave that for another show. But
Exactly.
yeah, now you have done an awful lot of traveling, an awful lot of research. But what is next for you?
Oh, well, I am heading to the Bay Area in about 10 days because I have an event that I co-produced called the How Weird Street Fair that we're doing in downtown San Francisco on September 21st. So that's going to start taking up all my time here. But I do have to get Beyond Esoteric's second edition wrapped up and sent to the printer, and coming out with a new catalog for CCC Publishing, which will
Mhm.
also be released. before I head to the Bay Area. And then I've got 3 conferences in Arizona, your
Uh-huh.
state, in the month of October. Actually, 2 in Sedona in the middle of the month, and then 1 in Las Vegas, third weekend of October. And that's kind of wrapping up my conference schedule for 2024, but I'm already booking into 2025. And so I'll be in Florida, Orlando in October, and then probably going to be back at Contact in the Desert and Mount Shasta Summer Conference and a few of
Mhm.
those that I speak at every year too.
Mhm. I think you're, I think we're both speaking at the one starting on October 5th with, see, I think we're both on that one. There's 77 different speakers.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. The online one with Neil
Yeah,
Gar. Yep,
yeah, yeah.
that's
That's
right.
yeah. I think we're both speaking at that one. That's going to be fun.
Yep. Yeah, he does put on great online conferences. That's for sure.
Yeah, he does. He's a really sharp guy. And
Yeah.
when when you were up at Burning Man, did anybody see any UFOs or anything up there? Because I heard from there was, I don't know, a few years ago, there was somebody that was at Burning Man and they had a ship did a flyover.
Yeah, I can't say that I saw anything this year, but I have seen, well, what looked like a space station breaking up one year. This is probably 20 years ago, though. It was just streaking across sky, and then bits of particles were breaking off, but it just spanned the whole horizon. And I witnessed it with several others, and we just, wow, what was that? But again, it looked like it was probably some space junk
Yeah,
entering the atmosphere. But the good thing about being up there is there's very little light pollution, very little even smog or any kind of out in the desert. You don't have many clouds. So the stars were very bright this year. It was a dark year, meaning right around now the moon
yeah.
is hidden. So you could see a lot of stars, but I didn't hear of any other people saying
Yeah,
they saw anything anomalous.
yeah. Well, it doesn't happen every time, I imagine. But now you talk a little bit about also about more about your books and where they can find them and where they can get a
Yeah,
hold of you and so on.
sure. Yeah, I have written 10 books in total and 3 in the esoteric series. So it's a modern esoteric, beyond our senses, and then future esoteric, the unseen realms, and beyond esoteric, escaping prison planet. And those are all available, of course, at the online retailer named after a South American rainforest. But if you wanted to get a signed copy, then you have to go to cccpublishing.com. And then you'll see the other books like Awakening the Truth Frequency by Laura Eisenhower and Michael Jaco's books, Leo Lyons-Zagami, and many other great titles that we publish at CCC Publishing that you can get off our website.
Okay, good deal. So then Beyond Esoteric and then your website, both of them, mention them one time because I think people are start right now, they're looking around for a pen and paper.
Yes, cccpublishing.com. That's 3 letter C's and publishing, one word.com for the book publishing website. And then bradolsen.com is my personal website, all the projects that I'm involved in, as well as my conference schedule upcoming to find out where I'll be speaking in the near future.
Great. All right. Well, this has been fun to reminisce on some of the old missing history.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Augie. We always have a great conversation, and this one is not unlike the others we've had.
Yeah, well, we're both researchers, so we're diggers, I guess. That's the term
Yeah,
for it.
that is a good term for it.
Yeah, we're diggers. But I thank you very much for being with us because I want to have you back again really soon if
Always.
we can. Yeah, that'd be
Every couple
great.
months, we always get back together.
Yeah, let's do that. That'd be good. And for those of you out there watching right now, go and check it out. cccpublishing.com. Your life will be better for going there and having a look at these books because knowledge is power, especially if you know what to do with that power. So in the meantime, for all of you out there, see you next week. And in the meantime, be good to each other.